Alright, let's pretend to be a writer. Here we go. Chapter 2. Don't look at the moon. Time passes differently as you lay the sounds into it. Trapped in a structure, it plays back in layers. A line moving across the screen like time moving again from before to now, while never leaving now. The energy is in there too. It elevates, procreates, penetrates, and finally evaporates like mist after sunshine. All is now heard, not seen. The clarity reveals impossible beauty. James watches the spectral wave dance on the screen. This was something. He felt it. 9 hours in, 9 hours gone, 9 hours of moment. An instant stretched, then compressed to a memory with evidence. This is it. This is... The doorbell buzzer rattles and shatters the thought, punctuating the creative pleasure response like a knife through a clitoris about to come. Getting up slowly, then remembering it was Sunday and he wasn't expecting visitors, James rolled back the soft leather office chair and turned it to face the far corner. He stared at a door that opened in and out of his studio. It seemed further away than usual. The buzzer went again, sharp and short, and the length of the follow-up buzz made the monotone cacophony all too familiar. No, surely not. Fuck. A wave of panic. Fight or flight, then a nervous attempt to check he had clothes, pockets, hair and body parts lasted only a few seconds before composure was recovered. It can't be her. It's not her. With a face filled with much less blood and more dread, James walked across the living room area in the center of his spacious live-in music studio. Once he crossed the carpet and was back onto the polished concrete floor and its fading graffiti mural, his pace quickened towards the screen next to the door. It was currently brightly backlit to about 300 nits, casting a cold bluish light into a small section of the warmer end of the room he just came from. The video security system was playing the History Channel. His history. That face in that screen. Impossible. Shit. He breathed aloud. Then a barrage of memories, electric goosebumps on her skin then his, followed by cool night air and warm seas, salty white skin and nights so alive and days under duvets and walks without direction or feet or conversation, floating on and in and out of each other within an impossible haze of maybe love, because love is always a maybe. The thought stream stretched time and snapped back to a shocked expression on a flustered head on a body breathing without pattern or rhythm. James was reliving it all again, not knowing how long the sensation had overcome him. He pulls focus from his blurry mind back to the screen. He watches her look up and right to the camera. He felt that look like it was centimeters from his face. She held the gaze, redirected it down and left to the expectant door handle, awaiting the buzz back that unlocks it. Two thoughts pass each other in the narrow corridor of James's mind. I'll fly a muse across the sky just to know she's closer to the moon, as the second thought shunted the first. Push the fucking buzzer, she's back. The more urgent thought wins control of the body. James pushes the entry button. A loud electric buzz and a mechanical click echo into the alley where Natasha stood. London bricks in walls stained from years of coal and ash stand proud either side of a sliver of shiny well-worn cobbles. The moment was almost Dickensian, except for the mixture of orange and white blue light. Orange from the sodium bulb of the street lamps and blue from the LED of the security light, making all too clear Natasha's face. The video capture was always clear around the entrance. The intention of her being at his door was less so. Natasha reacts to the tail end of the echoey click after the buzzing sound was in reverb. She pushes a heavy horizontal stainless steel handle downwards, then pulls the large door with two hands and a lean to get momentum. She notices the cold of the handle against her skin. It was midsummer the last time she touched it. The door opens slowly, then fast as she slips around before it could close. The entryway reveals a stairway to somewhere she had not been for a long time. It looked steeper. She almost hesitated, but resumed her ascent, determined. Security lights anticipate the direction she knew to go and flicker into life through the maze of corridors above and across. James watches from his monitor, now in split-screen mode. She climbs the steps in a rhythmic clink of heels on galvanized steel. Each step was a breath not taken. Both of them paralyzed of mind, acting only in body, focused like the point of a sewing needle. The last corridor is blind to the CCTV James watched. The landing, the next set of stairs, and the walk down the long hallway were all part of the blind spot. He could hear her, though, the sound of her walking and his own heartbeat in duet. The wait was a torture, a neck below a guillotine. Unlatching a lock makes a noise from the almost silence of the corridor. Air moves closer and thickens like whipped cream. A feeling like a fully drawn longbow aimed. She paused. James opens the door and catches her eye for a second before she slips through the gap, ducking under his arm. She accelerates into the room, changing the mood with every motion. In the flurry of a flurry and in character, of course, she explores, picking things up and looking too closely at them, then misplacing them as a collective and calculated reimagination of decorative subtleties. She was talking but had not said hello or hi or even hey honey. A commentary of the mundane ensued, delivered without breath, a monologue of monotony. I remember this. Oh, this is new. Yes, this is new, right? What's this? When did the cleaner come last? That should be there, really, shouldn't it? It's so cold outside, I'll keep my coat on for a while. James followed slowly towards the seating area, where he hoped she would sit calmly and finally explain why the hell she was there. 1,000 fingerprints later, and she drops on a beanbag, placing a black Prada handbag next to her that stood proudly upright and rigid when released. Natasha manufactured a smile and a sigh simultaneously before ending the whole performance with a question. You have any papers? Without answering, James walked casually over to the desk where there was a tray sprinkled with tobacco and residual cannabis flecks fallen from the end of a joint while rolling the final twist. He picks up the kingskin papers. Just bring the whole tray, shouts Natasha bluntly. She didn't bring any weed, James thinks, as he smiles excited at the very feeling of her being meters away. He places the tray on her knees, looking down as she looks up and catches his eye for a second. It was dark enough in the room to hide the blush from both their faces. Natasha begins the process of rolling a joint, elegantly, silently, like a calligraphic monk. Each movement was calculated and accentuated and elegantly executed. She stood up momentarily to change the music to her own playlist. She had made it when they were together. She places the iPad back onto the elegant stand on top of the tall column where it resides always, so it would never have to be found. As the music began, she sat down, licked the long line of Arabic gum on one side of the translucent paper, halfway through catching James's eye again. This time without a blush and with a certain sexual confidence. She looked down, finishing the rolling process, and smiled to herself, thinking, this might be too easy. James took a lighter from his pocket that Natasha had seen many times before. He walked over to her again, but this time crouched down to her eyeline. The lighter was raised up, lit, and held centimeters from the end of the joint. A pregnant pause, like a first kiss from a gentleman. The lighter went 90% of the way, and Natasha leaned 10% towards the heat of desire. Sparks flew and crackled from the ignition and between them. She drew a long, deep breath, and the cherry of the joint glowed and crackled like a winter hearth. He was waiting for her to begin. There was no certainty that she would until he asked her a question, but he decided to wait. Natasha had decided the same. 3 songs later, and a joint passed well beyond its midpoint. James was allowed to indulge 4 puffs before reluctantly passing it back to an outstretched hand. James paused for the fun of it, her hand outstretched between them. She was seconds from a foot stamp or a growl as he relented and handed the joint back to her. The rolled paper slid between her fingers before they touched his and retreated to her lips. She finished it, stubbed and twisted it into an elegant Art Deco ashtray, and got up, walked to the kitchen, took a glass out from the cabinet above the sink and went straight to the fridge to ascertain the wine situation. As expected, there was a bottle of white already opened, just sitting in the door shelf. An ornate stopper clipped down onto it, meaning this bottle was open the night before. 1 glass was missing, which meant he might have been alone or he drank a beer and they had wine. She skipped over the thought and poured the white wine into a large red wine glass, leaving only a champagne glass worth left in the bottle. She took a long sip in the kitchen, then headed confidently back to the seating area. She sat down, but this time slumped deeper into the beanbag that appeared to be trying to swallow her. The joint was working. The wine worked hard to create condensation on the outside of the glass. The base of the glass was only centimetres from the coaster, meant to catch the droplets. James stood up and moved the glass. He decided she was not going to easily relinquish the curated speech she was holding close to her chest like a bundle of wet laundry. James sat back down, thinking. It may take a nudge to get her to drop the load, he thinks. Natasha, he says with an upward inflection, as she laid further back into the beanbag as if Freud himself was on the chair across from her. She didn't answer. He waited. Natasha had managed to get one long puff from a half-smoked joint she had found and had relit with her own lighter before throwing it directly into the unlit open hatch of a 19th century wood-burning stove, always on in winter months. She dropped the lighter into the top of her upright Prada bag while looking at James, assessing the exact moment she would unfurl her monologue. Autumn began. James would never see the winter fire lit that would burn that roach away.